Is the whiskey hobby dying or are people being overly dramatic? I'm getting a lot of questions on this, having a lot of conversations out it backstage and with different whiskey friends. And I think there's a lot to break down. So I got a few angles at this I want to discuss, and I want to see where you stand at the end of this as well. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining today. On Tuesdays, we do like to have discussions coming from questions and comments that we get either from our wonderful Patreon community, Instagram, or YouTube subscribers. So if you have a question after this, hey, come on back. We'll try to give it a response in video form just like this. And today's questions are all revolving around what is happening to the whiskey hobby in general. It seems like there's a lot of whiskeys on the shelves that used to not be on the shelves. Are people not hunting as more? People are talking about not going onto Facebook anymore, even to talk about bourbons, aren't posting pictures of their bottles like they were, aren't engaging in conversations about bourbon like they were. So there's something generally happening that is causing a decline in what I would call the hobby side of the whiskey journey. Now, I define the hobby side as either being hunters or chasers. I'll get back to that in just a moment. What I'm not getting into is any decline in overall sales. If you track whiskey sales, you know that those are held up by brands like Jack Daniel's Number 7 or Fireball or all these other things that move a lot of volume. As much as the hobbyists like to talk about whiskey and get nerdy about it, let's be honest, we are still a small percentage when it comes to the sales volume in and of itself. So, with the idea then of if this hobby is dying, I do think there is a difference between hunting bottles and chasing whiskey, a difference between hunters and chasers. So, to define those terms up front, because I do think there are then two different stories going on that are having different impacts of what people are seeing out there. The bottle hunters are going to be people that get a thrill out of going into random whiskey stores just for the thrill of the rarity, the thrill of the hunt. And a lot of the times, some of these people, not all, will display those bottles as trophies on their shelves. A lot of the times, maybe even unopened. It's just there because they know it's rare, and it being rare makes them feel good that it is on the shelf. Hey, good for them. However, you want to play that, every single hobby has that type of characteristic in it where people keep the figurines and the packaging or the baseball cards and this giant display case that no one could ever touch it ever again. The other thing that I've noticed when it comes to stereotypical hunters, though, but they're also the ones that are more likely to flip bottles, I would call that a catch and release system. So they get the thrill of catching the fish, but they have no intention of eating the fish or doing anything with the fish. So they just throw it back into the pond, uh, theoretically speaking, and flip the bottle. So those would be your hunters versus, say, your chasers. Now, the chasers are seeking the next best thing. So they don't necessarily care about the bottle being rare or not. They just want to try it and just to experience it. And they might be willing to pay a lot of different prices just to experience something. But most likely, when it comes to the chasers, those bottles are going to get open and probably open pretty quickly. They also like to be those early adopters, the ones that find that new brand that then want to talk about it and feel cool talking about the new brand. The hunters might feel cool with the shiny bottles on the shelves, but the chasers feel cool. Oh, do you know about this brand? Let me be the first one to tell you it. All right, I'm guilty of all these things. We know this. Then when it comes to also what they're drinking. I mean, sometimes I think the chasers will drink things they don't even enjoy. They're just looking to experience something new, even if that something new isn't something that they actually like. They have enjoyment just experiencing it. So you can kind of see the difference then in these two crowds and how I am approaching the bourbon hobby from two different angles, and then talking about reasons possibly why each of these crowds is feeling the pressure and thus feeling the decline, and then everybody is witnessing it in different ways. So, starting with the bourbon hunting, a lot of the times I think the thrill is gone. One of the things that took away from the thrill is the prices. As the prices at the stores began to catch up to the secondary market or exceeding the secondary market, it took the thrill out of hunting, out of a lot of people's day to day life. It wasn't about driving to that liquor store anymore just to see if they had something. Instead, people got kind of pessimistic that even if they found something, it would just be sitting there for $1,000, 10 times the MSRP. What's the point? It kind of loses its fun when you can't actually catch anything anymore because everything is so far away in terms of its price. Another angle would be people were playing Pokemon with these bourbon bottles. If you don't understand the reference, essentially they had 150 stamps to collect. And once they collected all of those stamps, they were done with the game. So they wanted to get a Weller white label and a Weller green label and a Weller red label. Well, slowly but surely, month after month, week after week of hunting, they checked those boxes off. And maybe they tried them, maybe they didn't, but the thrill was being a completist and, getting bingo, getting Yahtzee on a few things. But once you catch it all, hey, what left is there to do? I mean, it's not like these legacy brands are coming out over and over again with new brands for us to chase. And those new brands, if they do come out with them, never have quite the luster of the original BTAC line or Victor's 10 or all of those type of brands. The new brands just don't hold that much weight. They might be fun to chase for a little bit here, but you know. Then I also see people more and more, if they did play that Pokemon game, they got to try everything, right? Well, now you tried everything. I'm just going to settle back into my greatest hits. This brings me my first music analogy of this whole thing. But when it comes to music and when it came to chasing new songs, you kind of age out of it slowly but surely. And then you settle into the tried and true albums that you've always loved and into your own greatest hits. I see a lot of that happening where instead of trying 10 different things anymore, it's like, oh, you know what? I figured out the two things I like. I know I can get them on the shelf. I'm just fine doing that from now on. I don't have to hunt these things. So then getting into the chasers, I do think it is a little different, but some parallels as well. First, is the juice worth the squeeze? That price part of it really does box people out of the whiskey market. Now, I understand all of these brands trying to maximize their value. And if you only have 2,000 bottles, it doesn't matter too much if you make those 10,000 people mad that couldn't get it, if you still find the 2,000 people that are still willing to buy it and you sell out. Now, I think that's short term games versus the long term, because I think you are alienating a big portion of your audience that just might not be there going forward. But maybe they're cashing in while the iron is hot. But a lot of the times, now that these bottles have gotten to $200, $300, $450, if I think about the wild turkey generations, I never had an inclination that I was ever going to buy that wild turkey bottle. I do know some people that got it. I'd love a sample, but I'm not going to buy that bottle. They've priced me out of the market. Anything above 200 really makes me squeal as is. And more, anything above 100 is starting to pull at my heartstrings. Also, it is exhausting to try to stay ahead all the time, especially in the amount of new distilleries that really came on the map the last 10 years. Getting to know all of them, getting to understand their flavor profiles, getting to understand all of their releases. It is a lot. Now, Kelsey Durrell and I have had a lot of fun doing that, but we are definitely on the extreme of things when it comes to chasing these new experiences and being relentless about it. It's also helped that there's three of us here at the channel because we can share with each other. Not all of us has to buy something for all of us to try it. And we have a network of whiskey friends who we share with on a regular basis as well. So in the end, we get to try everything. We get to keep sharing everything, playing in that ecosystem. And that's how we get to have all these different experiences. But it does get rather exhausting. Once again, I'm going to end this one on a music analogy as well. But I was into indie rock, throughout my 20s, throughout my 30s, still am. And barely anybody gives a crap about that album I was into. And I see the same thing happening with whiskey. When I have a bottle share, and let's just say it's not with the nerdiest of the nerdiest whiskey folk. We're just talking everyday friends. They dabble in whiskey. They just want to have a drink. And I'm going to come out and I'm going to start pulling out all these craft whiskeys and all these brands that I'm excited about. They don't give a crap. They don't know what these labels are. They don't know what these brands are. Yeah, I'm introducing them to it, and maybe you have a breakthrough every once in a while, but they're just here to have a good time. And they would be just as happy if I laid a 90 proof Buffalo Trace on the table. And that is what we drank all night long versus me incessantly having them come to my basement and get a new pour and try this one. Oh, you don't like this one? Well, try this one. And I just keep doing that to them. I mean, let's be honest. On some level, they are humoring me. And if you're doing the same thing, you know who you are as well. So some things won't change, though. As much as we want to say that things are in decline, there are other things that are staying the same. The Buffalo Trace, as an example, that is still selling out. Everywhere I go, every store I go to, it moves quickly. That is like classic rock radio. I don't think Buffalo Trace is going to go out of style. If there's anyone now that has set their heads above the water, and if there is any type of retraction in the market, I don't think Buffalo Trace is going to hit it. They are mainstream, all the bottles. They will continue to be sought after. I'd be very, very surprised if that changes anytime soon, if ever at this point. Now, the other thing I think will be difficult is that limited releases will still be very hard to get, even if there is some type of retraction in this hobby. Where we started, let's say 15 years ago, we were at this level. And then we had the bourbon boom, and we went all the way up to this level. And the amount of people that were in this space, even with some retraction to about this point, there are still plenty of people in this hobby that anything that's coming out, that's 1,000 bottles, 2,000 bottles, 5,000 bottles, heck, even 10,000 bottles will probably move with relatives certainly, if the quality, of course, is there, if the hype's there, if the brand trust is there. So getting limited releases, especially if we're talking about something that's just 1,000 bottles, that's not going to get any easier. There are too many in the hobby, and there's probably too many going forward. Essentially, the floor of how many people are in this hobby is just quite immense, and it's going to make those limited releases move. And that's also going to then mean those prices ain't coming down. So that was the last point here. I don't think prices will come down. I think brands might go away. I think new SKUs might get created to essentially put things at more price friendly budgets if the brands have to. But I don't think you're suddenly going to see bottles that right now are $100 suddenly regularly be on the shelves for 60, at least not in just an extreme discounted fashion where you just wouldn't see that bottle anymore once it's gone. So don't expect those prices to come down, but hopefully they at least stabilize and they don't get any more expensive as they are today. Other things that may change, but brands that some of us chasers love may go out of business in this retraction. Essentially, there were a lot of companies that maybe missed the boom by just a year or two, and now they've got to wade through choppier waters. It's a red ocean versus a blue ocean, essentially, and there's going to be some brands that probably go under that we all adore, and that's going to be a very sad side effect of this. Now, maybe if they don't entirely go under, those brands will get bought out or consolidated into other books of business, into other brands. Those barrels are still worth money, especially the ones laid down that have been aging for so long. People will buy those, gobble those up, and those brands still have some equity in them for some of the other brands. So expect some of the brands to just continue to get bought out, much like Bardstown bought out Green River. And the other thing that I am seeing is the experimentation may slow down or at least may not be as rapid as it was the last couple of years. An example of that would be the finishes. If we go back to circa 2019, 2020, 2021, it seemed like everyone was trying to outcompete each other for who could come up with this finish, that finish, who could get a hold of these barrels, who could use this wine, who could use that wine, who could mix the two together, who could do some strawberry milkshake, banana cream thing. They were just going crazy on the experimentation, at least with finishing barrels. You don't see that too much. Now, the experimentation now does seem to be more about the blending rather than the finishing, but ultimately, if there is some type of retraction and people aren't buying the experimentations will slow down. They will become even more limited, maybe just local, and they will strive to get out to that mass market with more sustainable and scalable products. So that would make me really sad if that one were to come true. So those are just some thoughts on what I see ahead for bourbon. I don't see it dying as a hobby, but I do see it slowing down. And I really think the slowdown is probably inevitable at this point. I think between the prices going up, between people just catching everything they could, getting bored with it, et cetera, once people start changing their hobbies on even the littlest things, like not checking Facebook incessantly for bourbon purposes or texting their friends all day about bourbon, once those hobbies break, once those habits break, the other ones start to break down. And that's just how a hobby comes and goes in people's lives. They'll find something else to occupy their time. And hopefully I have enough whiskey friends to keep this journey going a little bit longer, because I am still having a heck of a lot of fun. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Totally interested to hear what you think on this particular topic and the different points that were covered today. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? And what are you seeing in your area? Love to know. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. We'll catch you on the next Tuesday discussion. Goodbye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello